voters do not care much about policy. They pick candidates because they like them, and feel they care. Skillful politicians know how to deploy policy to signal affinity between themselves and their audience. Build a wall did not mean simply, I'm going to erect an impenetrable barrier along our southern border. It was also Donald Trump's way of telling voters that, like some of them, he preferred an America with fewer immigrants. Similarly, Medicare for All does not just mean, I will immediately abolish all private insurance and move people to a state program. It is a way for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to communicate that they aspire to a more activist government. As well as liking and aligning with candidates, ideally voters should feel they know them well, too. Political campaign books are a sign of seriousness to activists and donors. In best ones, candidates tell voters what they think, who they are, where they come from and what they want to do in office. Rallies, debates and adverts reach more people, but books give politicians space. They can introduce themselves and their ideas without interruption and at length. These works all follow certain conventions. Parents and teachers are praised. Every remembered interaction offers a lasting lesson. Obstacles are overcome and doubters vanquished, but each is also an artifact of the candidacy it promotes. Each chapter in Bernie Sanders' book, for instance, is headlined with a date. Where we go from here reads as though, on those particular dates, he turned on the recording function on his smartphone, shouted into it for a while, and then got an intern to transcribe everything. Most candidates edit and present their earliest memories. Not Mr. Sanders. In passing, readers learn that he has children, grandchildren and a brother, and that he first ran for the Senate as a third-party candidate in 1971. During a visit to Missouri, a colleague slept in a bed that Margaret Thatcher had used, whereas Mr. Sanders opted for a room across the hall, whether out of principle or for convenience is unclear. Mr. Sanders' aversion to personal details extends beyond his own. He says he got goosebumps from talking to a D-Day veteran, and will never forget meeting him, but fails to note what the man actually said. In his world there are no individuals, just victims of malign historical forces that must be defeated through revolution. Readers will learn nothing about him that they did not already know. That itself tells them something valuable. Like President Trump, Mr. Sanders is a factional candidate uninterested in expanding his base. He will happily accept more votes, but from people whose eyes have become unscaled. The grubby business of persuasion and compromise is beneath him. By contrast, Ms. Warren, Mr. Sanders' rival on the left of the Democratic field, turns out to be quite good at persuasion. It is not an endorsement of her policies to note that she is conspicuously better than any other candidate at explaining why she favors them, and why they matter to ordinary people. She has a rationale for running. She wants to rebuild the American middle class by reviving New Deal regulations and adding more. In This Fight Is Our Fight, she connects everything back to that mission. She turns her upbringing into a discourse on wage stagnation. Gina, a woman Ms. Warren met soon after she began writing her book, exemplifies the struggles of middle-class Americans. People are individuals, not oppressed, indistinguishable masses. Gina is the kind of woman who talks to people around her in the grocery store line and who knows every clerk by name. At times, Ms. Warren's political platform seems a sort of leftist Trumpism, with corporations rather than immigrants as the villains responsible for all ills. But if Democratic primary voters decide they want a fighter rather than a conciliator or sloganeer, she might be the choice. The other frontrunner, Joe Biden, leads with his heart. Mr. Biden has suffered terrible loss. When he was 30, just weeks after he was first elected as a senator, his wife and infant daughter died in a car crash. Promise me, Dad centers on his last years as vice president, when he was deciding whether to run in 2016 and his older son, Beau, was struggling with the cancer that ultimately killed him. Even Mr. Biden's most ardent opponents might find themselves moved, though the most emotive section is the eulogy for Beau delivered by Barack Obama, a reminder, like the rest of these books, that no president, except perhaps Ulysses Grant, has written as well as Mr. Obama. Speak, Memory. By contrast, readers of The Truths We Hold by Kamala Harris are at no risk of an emotional response. Ms. Harris is for all the good things and against all the bad ones. She has a lawyer's gift for framing debates. Her slogan, "We must speak truth," implies that other politicians do not. She became a prosecutor, she claims, not out of political ambition, though that is no sin, as unambitious politicians tend not to win, and they certainly do not run for president, but to be on the front lines of criminal justice reform, to protect the vulnerable. Throughout, her thoughts are farther left than her actions, which will strike some readers as prudent and others as insincere. Her fellow ex-prosecutor, Amy Klobuchar, has produced a much stranger book. She calls herself, and her book, The Senator Next Door, which, like the cover image of her with a cup of coffee and a newspaper, is meant to convey everyday relatability. And indeed, Ms. Klobuchar did have a modest upbringing. Yet her prose seems most alive when she is listing the impressive jobs held by her friends or rehashing old grievances. Readers will learn the names of the school principal who sent her home in 4th grade for wearing trousers, of the neighbors who failed to chain their scary dog, and of a teacher who predicted an average future because young Amy colored in a bunch of grapes poorly. Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker and Marianne Williamson have written kinder books. Mr. Buttigieg says he would have been a novelist had he not run for office, and it shows in his eye for character and detail in Shortest Way Home. Mr. Booker defies literary conventional wisdom. Making nice people interesting is notoriously hard, and even harder when the nice person himself is narrating, but in United Mr. Booker comes across as both generous and a shrewd observer. He seems to lack ruthlessness, which speaks well of him as a man but less so as a contender. Ms. Williamson does not lack ruthlessness so much as experience, attention to detail and, in a politics of love, an ability to speak in anything other than patchouli-scented cliches. Spirituality is the path of the heart and love is the nutrition of the gods are phrases more worthy of a fortune cookie than of a would-be president. As for her plea to break free of the rationalism constraining our politics, the current occupant of the White House has accomplished that neatly already. Let's block ads. Why?